The rain-slicked streets of Yokohama gleamed under the sodium lamps, the harbor's salt-laced wind carrying the distant groan of cargo ships. In the shadowed underbelly of the port district, where the Yakuza's influence coiled like smoke from a backroom cigar, Kenji Sato moved with the quiet authority of a man who owned the night. At 45, the Oyabun of the Satogumi was a figure carved from granite, tall, broad-shouldered, his tattooed arms hidden beneath a tailored black suit, the faint scar on his jaw a reminder of a betrayal long buried. His empire spanned shipping routes from Tokyo Bay to Busan, a web of legitimate fronts masking the flow of contraband. But tonight, his mind was on legacy, not logistics. Kenji's driver navigated the black Mercedes through the labyrinth of warehouses, the wipers slashing rhythmically against the downpour. In the passenger seat, his second-in-command, Hiroshi, scrolled through a burner phone's encrypted messages. "The shipment from Incheon is delayed," Hiroshi murmured, his voice low over the hum of the engine. "Customs sniffers at the docks, probably that rival crew from Osaka stirring trouble." Kenji nodded absently, his dark eyes fixed on the blurred neon reflections. The Osakans had been testing boundaries for months, small incursions into his territory. A hijacked truck here, a whispered threat to a supplier there. But Kenji's code held firm. No innocents touched, no wars without cause. It was the vow he'd made after losing his wife, Aiko, to a car bomb meant for him 12 years ago. Their daughter, Miko, was all that remained of her, now a sharp-eyed teen under constant guard. The car slowed as they approached the private dockside restaurant, a discreet haven called Kuroihana, its lanterns swaying in the gale. Kenji had come for a meeting with an old contact, a Korean fixer named Park, who bridged the gap between Japanese syndicates and their Busan counterparts. Family ties ran deep in this world. Park's grandmother, Halmeoni Kim, had been Aiko's confidant in her final years, a bridge across the cultural chasm that had defined Aiko's life. Korean blood in a Japanese Yakuza wife wasn't uncommon in Yokohama's melting pot, but it had always drawn shadows. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sizzling wagyu and aged sake, the low murmur of conversations punctuated by the clink of glasses. Kenji slid into a tatami-matted booth, Hiroshi at his flank, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Park arrived minutes later, his wiry frame bundled in a rain-dampened coat, an elderly woman trailing him, Halmeoni Kim, her silver hair pinned in a neat bun, face etched with the lines of a life spent in the fringes of power. She was tiny, almost swallowed by her wool shawl, but her gaze was steel, carrying the weight of secrets. "Kenji-san," Park greeted with a bow, sliding into the seat opposite. "Halmeoni insisted on coming. Family matters, she says." Kenji inclined his head, a flicker of warmth softening his features. The old woman had been like a shadow mother to Aiko, sharing recipes and stories from the old country during those tense pregnancies that never came to term after Miko. Now, as sake was poured, the talk turned to business. Delayed shipments, a possible mole in the crew, the Osakans' push into counterfeit routes. But Halmeoni sat silent, her gnarled hands folded until the conversation lulled. Then she leaned forward, her voice a whisper that cut through the room's hum like a knife through silk. "Kenji," she said in accented Japanese, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that froze the air. "There is a girl in the orphanage on the edge of Chinatown. She has your late wife's eyes, Aiko's almond shape, the same quiet fire, and our blood, Korean roots, hidden but strong." Kenji's glass paused midway to his lips, the sake's warmth forgotten. The words hung, heavy as the storm outside, stirring ghosts he'd long suppressed. Aiko's eyes, dark, knowing, the ones that had seen through his armored world to the man beneath. But our blood. Halmeoni's implication was clear. a connection, perhaps familial, tied to Aiko's heritage. His mind raced through logistics, old ledgers from Aiko's side of the family, whispers of a half-sibling lost in the war's aftermath, adoptions buried in falsified records to evade Yakuza vendettas. Was this a ploy? Park's expression was neutral, but Hiroshi shifted subtly, hand inching toward his concealed pistol. The old woman's gaze didn't waver. I saw her last week, delivering supplies to the nuns. Name's Ji-yeon, 18, sharp as a blade, working nights at a noodle shop to pay for books. But eyes like that, they draw trouble. Yours, perhaps. Kenji set the glass down, the clink echoing. Surveillance was his world, cameras on every corner, tails on rivals, access codes to orphanage, manifests that could be pulled in hours. Yet this felt personal, a thread pulling at the frayed edges of his code. If the girl carried Aiko's bloodline, she was under his protection by unspoken law, a vulnerability in a life built on ironclad loyalty. The Osakans would exploit it, turn a family secret into leverage. "Why now?" he asked, voice steady but edged with the chill of the harbor wind, seeping through the walls. Halmeoni's lips thinned. "Because the shadows are closing. A man was watching her. Not one of yours. Bring her here. See for yourself." As the rain hammered the roof like impatient fists, Kenji's thoughts fractured. A debt to Aiko's memory, a threat to his legacy, Miko's safety intertwined with this stranger's. He nodded to Hiroshi, who slipped out to make calls, burner phone already lighting his face in the dim hall. But as the old woman sipped her tea, a subtle behavioral tell caught Kenji's eye. Her fingers trembled, not from age, but something deeper. Fear or calculation? Outside, the Mercedes idled, headlights cutting through the sheets of water. Kenji stepped into the night, coat collar turned up against the spray, the salt air mixing with the faint metallic tang of the bay. Who was this girl, really? And what old grievance had resurfaced to whisper her name now? The harbor fog clung to Kenji's coat like a second skin as he slid into the Mercedes, the door thudding shut against the relentless downpour. Hiroshi was already behind the wheel, engine purring low, his face illuminated by the glow of the dashboard. "Orphanage records are being pulled," he said without preamble, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "Burner line to a contact at City Hall. Should have Ji-yeon's file in 20. Photos, too." Kenji nodded, staring out at the blurred silhouettes of cranes looming over the docks like skeletal sentinels. The sodium lights cast long shadows on the wet asphalt, turning puddles into fractured mirrors of the night. Back at the compound, a fortified mansion on the hillside overlooking Yokohama Bay, its walls ringed by motion sensors and discreet guards. Kenji paced the study. The room smelled of polished oak and faint cigar smoke, walls lined with ledgers disguised as antique scrolls. Miko was asleep upstairs, her room a fortress of its own with reinforced glass and a nanny who doubled as a spotter. He couldn't let this ripple touch her. Halmeoni's words echoed. Aiko's eyes, our blood. It stirred old logistics he'd buried. Adoption papers from the post-war chaos, when Korean families scattered like ash, falsified to shield children from vendettas. Aiko had hinted at a half-sister once, lost in the shuffle of migrations, but grief had sealed those conversations away. Hiroshi entered with a tablet, the screen's blue light cutting through the dimness. "Here, Ji-yeon Park. No relation to our park, at least on paper. Born in Busan, orphaned at 5 after a warehouse fire. Smuggled over at 12 via a fishing boat route we used to run. Nuns took her in. She's been scraping by. Nights at that Chinatown noodle joint. Days studying accounting at a community college." He swiped to a grainy photo. A young woman, 18 perhaps, with sharp features and those eyes, dark, almond-shaped, holding a quiet intensity that twisted something in Kenji's chest. Aiko's gaze staring back from a decade-old grave. "Surveillance?" Kenji asked, voice level, though his fingers tightened on the armrest. "2 teams on rotation, one's already at the orphanage, quiet watch." But Halmione wasn't exaggerating, spotted a tail on her shift end. Black Hyundai, plates from Osaka, no plates visible in the feed, but the driver's got a tattoo, Osakan ink, spiderweb pattern. They're circling. Kenji's jaw set. The rival's push wasn't random. This felt targeted, like they'd sniffed out a vulnerability through the same underground whispers that reached Halmione. He thought of the delayed shipment, the mole Hiroshi had mentioned. A discreet ledger from last month's counterfeit run showed discrepancies, missing manifests, rerouted trucks. If the Osakans knew about a potential heir, blood tie or not, they'd weaponize it. Leverage against his code, protect the family no matter the cost. "Bring her in," Kenji decided, the words tasting of salt and resolve. "Escort detail, low profile. Tell her it's for her safety. Mention the watching eyes, but not me. Yet." Hiroshi hesitated, a rare crack in his facade. "She's no player in this, boss, dragging her into the fold. Miko's already asking questions about the extra guards." Kenji met his gaze, the weight of legacy pressing like the storm's humidity. "And if she's Aiko's shadow? We leave her exposed. It's on us, on Miko's future." Hiroshi bowed slightly and exited, the door clicking shut with finality. Alone, Kenji poured a measure of scotch, the liquid burning a path down his throat. Autonomy versus possession, the pull of his world clashing with the girl's independence. He wouldn't force it, but protection was non-negotiable. Aiko's loss had taught him that. Dawn crept in grey and sodden, the bay's fog muting the gulls' cries. Ji-yeon wiped down the noodle shop's counter, the air thick with soy and steaming broth, her shift ending as the first commuters shuffled in. The place was a hole in the wall in Chinatown's warren of alleys, lanterns flickering against rain-streaked windows. At 18, she moved with efficient grace, long black hair tied back, uniform apron stained from the night's rush. Books on ledgers and trade laws peeked from her bag. Dreams of a desk job, far from the dock's grit. But the orphanage had wired caution into her. Trust sparingly. Watch the shadows. As she locked up, a nondescript sedan pulled alongside, windows tinted but not opaque. The driver, a middle-aged man in a plain jacket, leaned out. "Ji-yeon? Name's Tanaka, from the Community Aid Office. We've got concerns. Someone's been following you. Get in, we'll talk safe." Her pulse quickened, eyes darting to the alley's end where a black car idled. Too still for coincidence. Behavioral tell, the driver's hand on the wheel, knuckles white, not casual. She'd noticed the same Hyundai last week circling her bus stop. "Aid office, show ID." He flashed a laminated card. Forged, she sensed, but the urgency in his voice rang true. No time for debate. The rain-masked footsteps approaching from behind. She slid in, the leather seats cool and foreign, the car accelerating smoothly into traffic. "Where?" she asked, gripping her bag like a shield. "Safe house. Questions later." The driver, Tanaka, glanced in the mirror, radio crackling softly. "Tail confirmed. Osaka plates, evasive." Ji-yeon's mind raced. Orphanage rumors of old family ties, Korean whispers from the nuns, nothing concrete, but eyes like hers drew stares, questions. Now this. The car wove through Yokohama's veins, past warehouses humming with forklifts, the harbor's brine seeping through vents. Tension coiled as they hit a red light. In the side mirror, headlights loomed too close. A jolt, rear-ended deliberately. Tanaka swore, flooring it as the Hyundai rammed again, tires screeching on wet pavement. Ji-yeon's heart hammered, the world blurring into horns and flashing lights. "Hold on," Tanaka barked, veering into a side street toward the docks. Gunshots? No, just the storm's thunder. But the pursuit felt like war. They lost the tail in a maze of shipping containers, the sedan's engines straining as it barreled toward a gated warehouse, Satogumi territory, unmarked but fortified. As the gate swung open, Ji-yeon caught a glimpse of guards melting from shadows, radios buzzing with guard rotations. Inside, the air shifted, drier, scented with oil and metal, far from her world's steam. Tanaka parked, escorting her to a sparse office. "Wait here. Someone wants to meet you." He left, door locking with a soft beep, access code engaged. Alone, Ji-yeon paced, the hum of generators vibrating the floor. A camera's red light winked from the corner. Who were they? And why did safety feel like a cage? Outside, through a narrow window, she saw Tanaka on a phone, nodding urgently. But in the fog-shrouded distance, a figure watched from the perimeter fence. Too still, phone to ear. Was the escort botched, or was the real threat already inside? The warehouse's fluorescent hum buzzed like a swarm of distant insects, casting stark pools of light across the concrete floor. Ji-yeon pressed closer to the narrow window, her breath fogging the grimy pane. The figure at the perimeter fence hadn't moved, a silhouette blurred by the fog, phone pressed to his ear, posture too rigid for a casual guard. The rain had eased to a drizzle, turning the air thick with the scent of rusting metal and diesel fumes from idling trucks outside. She scanned the room, bare walls, a metal desk scarred by years of use, a single chair, no phone, no exit besides the locked door. The camera's red eye blinked steadily from the ceiling, a silent sentinel logging her every shift. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, heavy, deliberate. The door beeped, unlocking with a hydraulic sigh, and Tanaka re-entered, his jacket damp, face etched with fresh lines of strain. "Boss is coming. Stay put. It's for your own good." He avoided her eyes, busying himself with a stack of manifests on the desk, shipping logs, yellowed and stamped with custom seals from Busan. Ji-yeon's gaze sharpened. One sheet caught her eye, a partial ledger listing crate numbers and dates, discrepancies jumping out like errors in her accounting textbooks. A reroute from Osaka, unsigned, behavioral tell. Tanaka's fingers lingered too long on the page, as if debating whether to hide it. "Who's the boss?" she demanded, voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Autonomy clashed with the fear coiling in her gut. 18 years of scraping by on her own, dodging the orphanage's whispers of family secrets that never materialized. Now this, yanked from her shift into a web of tinted cars and coded radios. Tanaka glanced up, his expression a mask of loyalty laced with unease. Someone who knows about the eyes on you. The Hyundai? Not random. They've been tracking patterns, your bus routes, shift ends. We intercepted a burner call. It's tied to counterfeit runs bleeding into our ports. Ji-yeon's mind raced through the logistics. The noodle shop bordered Chinatown's underbelly, where whispers of Yakuza turf wars filtered through like steam from the kitchens. She'd seen the black cars before, idling at intersections, but dismissed them as harbor traffic. Now, with the ledger's inconsistencies staring back, missing seals on Korean imports, dates overlapping her own smuggling-era arrival, it felt personal. "Our ports? You mean Satogumi? The ones who run the docks?" Tanaka's silence was answer enough, his hand drifting to his belt where a holster bulged discreetly. Before she could press, the outer gate groaned open, headlights slicing through the fog like accusatory beams. A black SUV rolled in, flanked by two sedans, tires crunching gravel. Kenji stepped out first, the rain beading on his broad shoulders, suit impeccable despite the weather. At his side, Hiroshi scanned the perimeter, radio clipped to his ear, crackling with updates. All clear on rotations, no breaches. But Kenji's eyes, dark, assessing, locked on the warehouse door as if sensing the fracture within. The scar on his jaw caught the sodium glow, a reminder of old battles, and for a moment he paused, the harbor wind tugging at his coat. Legacy weighed on him. Aiko's blood, potentially alive in this girl, a vulnerability the Osakans could twist into a blade against his code. No innocence harmed. That vow had cost him alliances, sleep, but it held his empire's fragile honor. Inside the compound's nerve center, a converted office stacked with monitors and encrypted servers, Kenji shed his coat, the air conditioner humming against the residual damp. Hiroshi synced the tablet to a larger screen, pulling up feeds from the orphanage and Ji-yon's routes. Tails pulled back, but they're adaptive. Change plates mid-chase. Fake Osaka registry, but the ink on the driver's hand matches a known Osakan enforcer, Taro Ikeda. He's got a history, turned on his own crew 2 years back for a payout. The screen flickered to a grainy clip, the Hyundai peeling away after the pursuit, but a side-angle camera caught a partial plate, ending in 729, cross-reference to a rental fleet used by rivals for deniability. Kenji leaned in, the scent of scotch from earlier clinging faintly to his shirt. Internal betrayal gnawed at him. The delayed Incheon shipment now screamed mole. A discreet ledger from the safe, pulled earlier, showed tampered entries. Quantities inflated, routes diverted to Osaka warehouses. If Ikeda was circling Ji-yon, it wasn't coincidence. Someone had leaked her photo, perhaps from the orphanage's visitor logs. Halmeoni's tremor replayed in his mind. Not fear, but the subtle shake of someone holding cards close. Trust versus suspicion. Was the old woman bridging alliances or planting seeds for Park's gain? "Bring her to the main house," Kenji ordered, voice low thunder. "Full escort. And pull Ikeda's file. Guard rotations, known associates. If he's inside our fence." He trailed off, the implication hanging like the fog. Hiroshi nodded, dispatching teams via radio. Short bursts of code for convoy assembly, jammers prepped against trackers. Back in the office, Ji-yon heard the vehicles circling, engines growling in sync. Tanaka unlocked the door again, gesturing her out. "Time to move. Boss wants a word." She followed, bag clutched tight, stepping into the warehouse's cavernous belly. Stacks of crates loomed like silent witnesses, labeled with innocuous freight. Electronics from Seoul, textiles from Tokyo. But the air hummed with tension. Distant clangs of forklifts, the low whir of security drones patrolling the rafters. As they crossed to the waiting SUV, Ji-yon's eyes darted to the perimeter. The figure was gone, vanished into the mist, but a fresh scuff mark on the fence wire glinted, cut and retied hastily. Human error or infiltration. The convoy formed, lead car probing ahead, hers sandwiched between armored flanks. Taillights weaving through the dockside maze. Rain resumed, pattering on the roof like impatient fingers. Inside, leather seats creaked as Ji-yon settled, Tanaka at the wheel, silent. Through the tinted glass, Yokohama's lights smeared into streaks, penthouses crowning the hills, tunnels burrowing under the bay. Safety felt illusory, a push-pull of gratitude and dread. Who was this boss, claiming shadows over her life? And if the Watcher had slipped inside, what access code had they cracked to get so close? As the gates to the hillside mansion swung open, cameras swiveling, guards melting into positions, Kenji watched from the study window, scotch in hand. The girl's arrival was a spark. Now, with Ikeda's shadow lingering, the flame threatened to ignite. But a radio crackled in Hiroshi's ear. Perimeter alert, motion at the east fence. False alarm? Or the start of something deadlier? Who had truly let the rival in? And what betrayals simmered in the ledgers waiting to be cracked? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The mansion's gates clanged shut behind the convoy, the sound reverberating like a final punctuation in the rain-soaked night. Ji-yon stepped out of the SUV, the gravel crunching under her worn sneakers, the air heavy with the scent of wet pine and distant sea salt from the bay below. The hillside compound loomed. a sprawling structure of dark timber and stone, its windows glowing like watchful eyes against the storm. Guards materialized from the shadows, their radios whispering static bursts, positions confirmed, sweeps initiated. She clutched her bag tighter, the strap digging into her palm, as Tanaka guided her up the stone steps. The chill seeped through her thin jacket, but it was the weight of unseen eyes that made her shiver. Cameras mounted on eaves, their lenses glinting faintly, logging every footfall. Inside, the foyer opened into a world of polished excess. Tatami floors warmed by underfloor heating, walls adorned with ink scrolls that masked hidden panels for safes and servers. The air carried a faint trace of sandalwood incense, undercut by the metallic tang of security systems humming in the walls. A maid, mid-40s, movements precise as a dancer, offered a steaming towel and a change of clothes, her bow deferential but her eyes quick, assessing. "This way, miss," she murmured, leading Ji-yeon down a corridor lined with sliding doors. Tanaka lingered at the threshold, his posture tense, hand near his radio. "Boss will see you soon. Don't wander." Ji-yeon's room was sparse yet secure. A low futon, a small desk with a locked drawer, windows barred subtly behind silk screens. She changed into the offered yukata, the cotton soft against her skin, but autonomy gnawed at her, trapped in silk, far from the noodle shop's familiar clamor. Through the screen, she glimpsed the hillside dropping to the harbor, lights twinkling like scattered jewels. But her mind replayed the warehouse watcher, the scuff on the fence. Was this rescue or relocation? The orphanage nuns had warned of family ghosts, Korean blood drawing predators in Yokohama's ports. But this felt orchestrated, a net closing with polite efficiency. Down the hall, in the study, Kenji stood before a bank of monitors, the screens flickering with feeds from the perimeter. Hiroshi hunched over a console, fingers flying across a keyboard, cross-referencing the motion alert. The room's air was cooler here, laced with the ozone hum of electronics and the faint bitterness of cooling coffee. "East fence," Hiroshi reported, voice clipped. "Tripwire snagged on a branch. False positive from the wind, maybe. But patrols found this." He held up a baggie, a discarded burner phone, its screen cracked, SIM ejected. No prints yet, but the casing bore a faint residue, Osaka dialect stickers. Faded kanji, for a tea house known as a rival drop point. Kenji's scar tightened as he turned the device over, the weight of betrayal settling like harbor silt. Legacy demanded vigilance. Aiko's death had come from a leaked itinerary, a turncoat driver who'd traded coordinates for yen. Now, with Ji-yeon's eyes echoing hers, the code pressed harder. No innocence, but protection meant exposure. "Run the logs," he said, voice steady as the bay's tide. "Access codes from the last hour. Who logged the warehouse gate? And pull Ikeda's rotations. If he's got a plant, it's internal." Hiroshi nodded, swiping to a digital ledger. Guard shifts overlaid with entry pings. A discrepancy blinked. Tanaka's code used twice, once at pickup, once at the compound arrival. Human error, or a subtle handoff. The door slid open, admitting a guard with a steaming tray. Tea and rice balls, simple fare to steady nerves. Kenji waved it off, his mind fracturing between duty and the pull of those almond eyes in the photo. Miko stirred upstairs, her soft footsteps audible through the vents. Another life to shield. If Ji-yeon carried Aiko's blood, as Halmeoni claimed, it wasn't just protection. It was restitution. A vow to mend what war and vendettas had torn. But suspicion coiled. Park's neutrality at the restaurant, Halmeoni's tremor, bridges or bait. Ji-yeon sipped the tea, the green warmth grounding her amid the unfamiliar quiet. The room's clock ticked softly, syncing with the distant generator's thrum outside. Curiosity warred with fear. Why her? The escort's urgency, the chase's screech of tires on wet asphalt, all pointed to stakes beyond a street tale. She edged to the desk, testing the drawer, locked, but a faint scratch mark gleamed under the lamp. Recent, deliberate. Prying with a hairpin from her bag, it popped open. Inside, a single sheet, a partial manifest from the warehouse crates, names blurred, Korean exporters, Japanese importers, but one line jumped. J Park, Busan route, reroute Osaka 729. Her own initials, tied to the chase car's plates. Heart pounding, she snapped a mental photo, slipping the paper back just as footsteps approached. The door opened without a knock. Kenji filled the frame, his presence commanding yet restrained. Tall, suit tailored to hide the Yakuza ink beneath. Eyes dark pools holding Aiko's quiet fire. He paused, the air thickening as if the resemblance struck him anew. "Ji-yon," he said, voice low, accented with the harbor's gravel. "I'm Kenji Sato. Sit." She didn't. "Why the escort? And that paper in the drawer, my name on a shipping log. This isn't aid, it's a setup." Her words hung sharp, independence flaring against the room's confines. Kenji's gaze flicked to the desk, then back, a flicker of respect crossing his features. Possessiveness tugged at him. This girl, echo of his lost wife, demanding answers in a world that silenced them. "The tail on you isn't random. Osakans, rivals pushing our ports. Your roots match leaks in our manifests. Halmione Kim sent word. She saw the eyes, the blood tie to my late wife. Protection, not possession, but threats don't wait for trust." Ji-yon's pulse raced, the manifest's implications crashing like waves. Her orphanage intake, smuggled at 12, now weaponized. "Blood tie? I'm no one's leverage. Let me go." But his code held her. Loyalty to Aiko's shadow, fear for Miko's safety. He stepped closer, the sandalwood scent mingling with rain on his clothes. "Go, and Ikeda's men follow. Stay, and we uncover the mole. Your choice, but the Watcher's already breached once tonight." A radio crackled from his pocket. Hiroshi's voice, urgent. "Boss! Fence cam replay." The figure wasn't wind. It's Ikeda himself. Slipped a jammer on the east post. He's inside the grounds. Kenji's hand tightened on the doorframe, the study monitors beeping in alarm down the hall. External pressure shattered the fragile calm. Rival infiltration, timed to the girl's arrival. Ji-yon's eyes met his. Aiko's fire mirrored as distant shouts echoed from the perimeter. Trust or flight. But with Ikeda loose in the shadows, the mansion's walls felt less like sanctuary and more like a trap closing in. Who had handed him the access code? And what ledger entry would reveal the turncoat's face before the blackout hit? The shouts from the perimeter sliced through the mansion's hush like shards of breaking glass, pulling Kenji from the room in a blur of motion. Ji-yon followed instinctively, her yukata whispering against the tatami as they hurried down the corridor. The air thickened with urgency, the sandalwood incense now overpowered by the sharp ozone of activated alarms. Low beeps echoing from hidden speakers, syncing with the guards' radios crackling in staccato bursts. Footsteps pounded from the east wing, shadows stretching long under the corridor lights as Hiroshi burst into view, his face slick with rain, pistol drawn but held low. "Boss, Ikeda's jammed the east cams, full sector blind. Patrols are sweeping, but he's ghosted into the service tunnels. Motion sensors tripped twice, then nothing." Hiroshi's voice was a tight wire, eyes flicking to Ji-yon before locking back on Kenji. The study door stood ajar behind them, monitors inside flickering erratically, their feeds glitching into static snow. Kenji's mind raced through logistics. The tunnels ran beneath the compound, a relic from wartime smuggling routes, access points sealed but not impenetrable. A single compromised code could flood the system, guard rotations logged, but overrides bypassed via insider hacks. "Lock down the core areas," Kenji ordered, his tone granite over the rising din. "Miko's wing first, double the detail. And pull the tunnel manifests. Who's had access in the last week?" He glanced at Ji-yon, her almond eyes wide but steady, Aiko's fire unyielding even in the chaos. Possession warred with his code. Keep her close, but not as bait. "Stay with me," he said softer, guiding her toward the central atrium where maids and lesser guards converged, faces pale under the chandelier's glow. Ji-yeon nodded, pulse thundering in her ears, the manifest echo burning in her thoughts, her name tangled in reroutes, a thread to this storm. The foyer felt smaller now, walls pressing in as distant thuds reverberated from below, perhaps a door forced or the storm's thunder masking heavier steps. She caught the scent of wet earth seeping up from vents, the hillside soil stirred by the rain. Autonomy screamed to run, but the locked gates and circling guards pinned her here, gratitude twisting into reluctant alliance. "That ledger," she whispered to Kenji as they moved. "The one in the drawer. Osaka plates my initials. It's connected, isn't it?" Kenji's jaw tightened, the scar pulling white. "More than you know. Leaks from Busan runs tied to your orphanage intake. If Ikeda's here, he's after confirmation. Blood or leverage." He didn't elaborate, but the implication hung. Her eyes, Halmione's whisper, now a target in flesh. Hiroshi peeled off toward a side panel, punching in a code that lit the wall with a holographic map. Tunnels snaking red, alerts pulsing at 3 junctions. "Tanaka's code pinged the service entrance an hour ago," Hiroshi reported, voice laced with doubt. "Said it was for supply check, but the logs show a second entry, no exit." Betrayal's chill settled deeper than the rain. Tanaka, the escort driver, his white-knuckled grip on the wheel during the chase. Kenji's code demanded proof, not assumption. Innocents spared, but turncoats purged. Find him, quietly. As Hiroshi vanished into the shadows, the lights flickered. A brief stutter. Generators whining in compensation. Ji-yeon's hand brushed Kenji's arm, unbidden, the contact electric amid the tension. "The blackout," she murmured, recalling orphanage tales of port blackouts used for hijackings. "They'll use it." The atrium doors burst open, admitting a soaked guard, his uniform mud-streaked. "Tunnel breach confirmed. Ikeda's got a knife. Took down a spotter. He's heading coreward, toward the study." Panic rippled through the gathered staff, but Kenji's voice cut through, steady as the bay's unyielding tide. "Evac routes active. Guards to positions, non-coms to the safe room." He steered Ji-yeon toward a concealed stairwell behind a scroll wall, the mechanism humming open on his palm scan. The air below was cooler, laced with the musty damp of concrete and old wiring, emergency lights casting a ruddy glow along the narrow passage. They descended, footsteps echoing softly, the mansion above muffled to a hum of shouts and slamming doors. Ji-yeon's breath came quick, the yukatta's hem brushing her calves, but her mind sharpened on clues. Tanaka's lingering on the warehouse manifest, the burner's residue in Hiroshi's baggie. "If it's him," she said, voice low. "Why? Money? Or something older, like the Korean ties?" Kenji paused at a junction, hand on the wall's sensor panel, its screen glowing with a partial ledger feed. Pulled remotely from the study servers. Entries scrolled, Tanaka's name on 3 reroutes, payments logged to an Osaka shell account. Human error. No, deliberate. The ink of greed. "Park's crew," Kenji replied, eyes narrowing at the data. "Halmione's grandson pushing boundaries, using old blood grudges. Your arrival was the spark. They fed Ikeda the photo, timed the tale. Loyalty fractured under the weight, his vow to Aiko's memory now clashing with the old woman's role. Was it protection, or a ploy to claim a slice of his empire through her? The lights dipped again, longer this time, plunging the stairwell into near darkness, save for the panel's faint blue. A scuffle echoed from above. Grunts, a muffled curse in Japanese. Kenji drew his own pistol, the metal cool in his grip, positioning Ji-yeon behind him. "Stay low." Udun, footsteps approached from the tunnel fork, heavy, deliberate, not guard cadence. Ikeda emerged from the gloom, wiry frame tensed, knife glinting under the emergency strip, his face twisted in recognition, spiderweb tattoo creeping up his neck. Sato, the girl's the key, eh? Blood debt from Busan, your wife's line owes us roots. He lunged, but Kenji sidestepped. The blade scraping concrete with a spark. Ji-yeon pressed against the wall, heart slamming, scanning for an edge, a loose pipe, a vent grate. The fight blurred. Kenji's controlled strikes, Ikeda's feral swings, the tunnel amplifying each thud and gasp. She spotted the panel's override switch, fingers fumbling in the dark, access code from the manifest's edge, 7-2-9. Flipping it triggered a siren, lights blazing back on, flooding the space. Ikeda faltered, blinded, and Kenji drove him back, a knee to the gut, followed by a precise disarm. Guards poured in from the upper stairs, Hiroshi at the fore, cuffing the rival as he spat curses. Panting, Kenji turned to Ji-yeon, the revelation settling like fog lifting. You saw it, the code, smart. Trust sparked in his eyes. Eiko's fire mirrored and kindled. But Hiroshi's radio crackled. Tanaka's cornered in the garage, confessing, full ledger dump incoming. The turncoat's exposure came at cost, a grazed arm for Kenji, the compound systems needing weeks to purge infiltrations. Ji-yeon met his gaze, autonomy yielding to the bond forged in shadows. What now? The blood tie. Real or ruse? Kenji holstered his weapon, the tunnel's hum steadying. Real enough to fight for, but the real threat's the one who whispered it first. As patrols secured the area, a distant rumble built, not thunder, but engines approaching the gates. Was it reinforcements, or the Osakans' counterstrike closing in before the full betrayal unraveled? The tunnel's emergency lights buzzed back to full strength, casting harsh shadows that danced across the concrete walls like fleeing specters. Kenji's breath came steady, his grazed arm throbbing with a dull heat, blood seeping through the torn sleeve of his shirt. Ikeda slumped against the guard's hold, his knife skittering across the floor, the metallic tang of exertion mixing with the damp earthiness of the underground air. Ji-yeon stood frozen for a beat, her fingers still tingling from the override switch, the code, 729, burning in her mind like a branded secret. The siren's wail cut off abruptly, replaced by the stomp of boots, and Hiroshi's barked orders echoing down the passage. "Secure him in the holding room," Kenji commanded, his voice a low rumble that cut through the chaos. He turned to Ji-yeon, his dark eyes holding hers, with an intensity that bridged the chasm of strangers. Aiko's gaze, reflected and alive, stirred something deeper than duty, a pull toward protection laced with the vulnerability of his code. "You handled that switch like you'd studied the system. Where'd you learn?" No accusation, just quiet respect, the harbor wind's faint whistle seeping through a vent overhead. Ji-yeon swallowed, the yukata's fabric clinging to her skin from the tunnel's chill. Autonomy clashed with the adrenaline's rush. She'd acted on instinct, piecing together the manifest's fragments like puzzles from her accounting classes. Books, and watching the docks, codes on crates, patterns in the shipments. Your world bleeds into mine. Her words hung, a tentative bridge, as guards hauled Ikeda away, his curses fading into the gloom. Trust flickered between them, fragile as the emergency strip's glow, but suspicion lingered. Halmione's whisper, the blood tie, real legacy, or a fabricated chain? Hiroshi approached, tablet in hand, its screen illuminating his tense features. The air hummed with the generator's whine, compensating for the brief blackout strain. Tanaka's in the garage, cornered by his own team. He's spilling. Park's been feeding intel to the Osakans for months, using Halmione as cover. Grudge from the old Busan roots. Aiko's family owed them after a wartime default. Your wife's half-sister was the link. Ji-yeon's her daughter, smuggled out to evade debts. He swiped to a digital ledger, entries scrolling in red. E-payments traced to shell accounts, reroutes matching the orphanage's intake date. Human error masked as oversight. Tanaka's pings, now damning. Kenji's scar pulled tight, the revelation twisting like a knife in old wounds. Legacy wasn't just blood, it was the vows he'd sworn over Aiko's grave. No innocence dragged into vendettas. But here Ji-yeon stood, eyes mirroring his loss, autonomy tested by the very ties that bound her. "Park played us," he murmured more to himself, the weight of betrayal settling like silt in the bay. Halmione's tremor, guilt, not fear. He glanced at Ji-yeon, possessiveness warring with her independence. He wouldn't cage her, but leaving her exposed shattered his code. "This changes nothing. You're under our roof until the dust settles." Ji-yeon's pulse steadied, the tunnel's confines feeling less oppressive with the lights restored. Gratitude edged her fear, the chase, the watcher, now explained by ledgers and old grudges. Yet ethics pulled. She wasn't property, blood tie or not. "Under your roof. Or your watch. I saved myself back there. Don't make me regret it." Her voice held edge, but she fell in step as they ascended the stairwell, the stone steps cool underfoot, distant shouts filtering through the mansion's vents. The atrium above was a hive of controlled frenzy, maids directing non-coms to safe rooms, guards checking access panels with handheld scanners. The chandelier swayed faintly from the storm's residual gusts, casting fractured light on the tatami. Hiroshi's radio crackled again, urgent. "Convoy inbound. 3 vehicles, no markings. Our reinforcements, or—" The rumble grew. Engines growling up the hillside road, tires churning gravel outside the gates. Kenji moved to the foyer window, peering through rain-streaked glass at the approaching headlights slicing the fog like accusatory beams. "Open the cams," he ordered, a side monitor flickering to life. The lead car was an armored van, Satogumi plates obscured by mud, protocol for deniability. But the trailing sedans idled too close. No radio ping from the perimeter team. Behavioral tell. The driver's silhouette shifted uneasily, hand not on the wheel but reaching low. "Jammers active," Hiroshi confirmed, cross-referencing with the tunnel breach logs. "They're masking signals. Osakan play, staging as ours to breach the inner gate." Tension coiled tighter, the air thick with the scent of wet wool from guards' coats and the faint, acrid bite of overheated electronics. Ji-yeon pressed beside Kenji, her shoulder brushing his, the contact grounding amid the rising stakes. "False alarm or infiltration," she whispered, mind racing through logistics. Convoy extractions she'd overheard at the docks, rivals using stolen codes for diversions. Miko's safety loomed unspoken. Miko, upstairs, the daughter whose future intertwined with this unearthed bloodline. Kenji's hand hovered near his holster, code demanding restraint. No rash fire but defense unyielding. Hold the gate, verify with the lead's transponder. The rumble peaked. Vehicles halting at the outer barrier, engines idling with predatory patience. A guard outside approached, flashlight beam cutting the dark, but a muffled pop echoed. Silenced shot. And he crumpled, radio silent. Alarms blared anew, red lights pulsing through the mansion like a heartbeat gone erratic. "They're in," Hiroshi barked, pistol raised as he rallied a detail. Kenji pulled Ji-yeon back toward the core safe room, his grip firm but not crushing. Protection, not possession. "Stay behind the line. This ends tonight." But as the gates groaned under forced entry, the first shots cracked against the stone facade, glass shattering in the east wing. Rivals poured in, shadows merging with the storm, Ledger's secrets now exploding into live fire. Ji-yeon's eyes met Kenji's one last time, the almond fire blazing with resolve. Was the Counter-Strike Park's final gambit? Or had Tanaka's confession missed a deeper mole, one whose access code would doom them all before dawn broke? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The mansion's alarms wailed like banshees in the storm. Red emergency lights pulsing through the corridors in erratic strobes that turned shadows into writhing threats. Glass shards from the shattered east wing crunched underfoot as Kenji pulled Ji-yeon deeper into the core. His hand steady on her arm, guiding her past sliding doors that slammed shut behind them like sealing tombs. The air reeked of cordite and rain-soaked earth. The harbor's distant foghorn a mocking underscore to the chaos above. Gunfire popped in controlled bursts, Sato Gumi guards holding the foyer line, their radios a frenzy of clipped coordinates. Flank east, 2 hostiles down, but the rivals pressed, their footsteps a thunderous echo on the stone steps, exploiting the jammed gates with bolt cutters and insider precision. Hiroshi's voice crackled over Kenji's earpiece, strained but sharp. Boss, convoy's a Trojan. Osakans in our vans, transponders spoofed. Ikeda's talking, it's Park's play, full force. Halmioni's in the loop. Her whisper was bait to draw you out. Kenji's scar burned with the truth's acid bite, legacy fracturing under the weight of old alliances turned venomous. Aiko's blood twisted into a noose. The half-sister's debt from Busan Wars, now Park's leverage to carve up the ports. No innocence. That code had blinded him to the grandma's calculation, her tremor a feint for deeper grudges. "Miko secure?" he demanded, shoving Ji-yeon into the safe room's antechamber, a reinforced bunker off the central hall, its steel door humming as hydraulics engaged. "With the nanny, sealed," Hiroshi replied, the line hissing with interference, jammers at work, blacking out secondary cams. But Tanaka's dead. Shot his own escape route. Took a ledger with him. Partial dump. Halmioni's calls to Osaka, coded as family chats. They knew about the girl years back, waited for the eyes to match. Ji-yeon's breath hitched beside him, her almond gaze fierce in the ruddy light, piecing the puzzle with the clarity of one who'd survived orphanage shadows. "The manifest in the drawer," she said, voice low over the din. "It was a plant, my initials forged to tie me in, make me the spark." Autonomy fueled her words, but fear edged them. This wasn't her fight, yet the blood whisper had dragged her into the fray, testing her independence against the pull of found ties. The safe room's panel beeped, access denied, a glitch from the blackout surge. Kenji overrode it manually, fingers flying across the keypad, the code from his vault. Aiko's birthday, a vulnerability now. Lights flickered compound-wide, generators groaning under overload, plunging the antechamber into near darkness, save for the panel's glow. Distant shouts swelled, rivals breaching the atrium, a staged diversion, with smoke grenades hissing through vents, acrid and choking. "They're flushing us," Kenji growled, positioning Ji-yeon behind a console stacked with emergency rations and burner phones. His grazed arm throbbed, blood warm and sticky, but pain sharpened his focus. Possession clashed with her fire. He'd shield her, not own her, but the cost mounted. Injury to his men, exposure of the ledger's full rot. A crash echoed from the hall, door splintering, footsteps scattering debris. Hiroshi burst through a side vent, face smeared with soot, pistol smoking faintly. East wings held, but Park's lead teams in the tunnels, rerouting from the breach point. Ikeda flipped under pressure, says the grandma's the architect, using the blood story to justify the hit. "Your wife's eyes were the hook, but it's the roots they want." He thrust a salvaged tablet at Kenji, screen cracked but alive, final ledger entries scrolling, Halmioni's name watermarking falsified manifests, Busan debts inflated to claim half the empire, betrayal's full bloom, internal and external, human greed exploiting institutional cracks in guard rotations and encrypted lines. Kenji's mind raced through logistics. The service tunnels looped back to the garage, a convoy extraction their only out. "Rally the detail. Armored van, east exit. Miko first, then us." But as they moved, A figure detached from the smoke-filled hall, Park himself, wiry and rain-drenched, flanked by two Osakans, their knives drawn low. No guns, deniable, per the code's twisted mirror. Sato, that Park called, voice oily over the alarms. The old woman's gift, your legacy, our due. The girl seals it, blood for blood. Halmione's ploy crystallized. Not protection, but a throne for Park, using Ji-yon's resemblance to fracture Kenji's vows. Ji-yon tensed, spotting a loose panel in the wall, a service hatch to the tunnels, unmarked but familiar from dockside whispers. "There!" she urged, prying it with trembling hands, the metal screeching softly. Kenji covered them, firing warning shots that echoed like thunder, forcing Park's trio back into the haze. Hiroshi scooped Miko from a hidden alcove, the teen wide-eyed but silent, clutching a stuffed fox Aiko had sewn, and they piled into the hatch, descending into the damp underbelly. The air turned clammy, laced with mold and generator fuel, emergency strips guiding their scramble through narrow conduits, water dripping from cracks like impatient tears. Pursuit thundered above, boots on grates, voices muffled but closing. The van waited in the tunnel's mouth, engine idling, guards waving them in as tires spun on slick concrete. Park's men breached the hatch behind, but Hiroshi's team laid suppressing fire, buying seconds. The vehicle lurched forward, barreling through the east exit into the storm-lashed night, headlights cutting fog as they evaded trailing cars on the hillside coils. A bullet grazed the rear panel. Cost exacted, one guard hit in the leg, cries swallowed by the roar, but they broke free, weaving toward a safe house in the port's labyrinth. Dawn grayed the bay as the van halted at a nondescript warehouse, its sodium lamps humming softly. Kenji helped Ji-yon out, Miko clinging to her side, the girl's quiet strength a balm. The threat had been real, orchestrated by Halmione's grudge and Park's ambition. Ledgers burned, contacts purged, but scars lingered. Kenji's arms stitched hastily, Hiroshi's team down too, the Empire's edges frayed. Victory tasted of salt and resolve, no easy vanishing. Rivals would regroup, but the core held. In the warehouse's dim office, amid stacks of innocuous crates, Kenji faced Ji-yon, the air still humming with diesel and relief. "The blood's real. Your mother's tie to Aiko, hidden but true. But it's not chains, it's choice. Stay, build with us. Miko needs family, not just guards." His voice softened, possessiveness yielding to partnership, the code evolving, loyalty over leverage. Ji-yon's eyes, Aiko's fire, her own, met his, independence tempered by trust forged in tunnels and gunfire. "Not belongs to you," she said, a small smile breaking, "but with you, for her, for this." Miko nodded, slipping her hand into Ji-yon's. The found family sealing in quiet pledge, no rings, just vows etched in survival. As the sun crested the harbor, painting the waves gold, Kenji watched the horizon, the adventure's echo outweighing spoils. Power faded, but memory endured. Loyalty's quiet strength, betrayals survived, a legacy rewritten not in blood, but bonds chosen against the night. The ports would heal, threats ebb. But this, trust amid the shadows, outlasted empires. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.